All right, and we are working on T10 case problem 3, the Appalachian House. First thing I will always continue to do is I'm going to click on this link right here and open my preview in a new tab so I can get a full screen preview, and also so that I can minimize this and get more room for my code view. And then I'm going to close my file tree. I'll open it only when I need it. And then I'm going to read through the summary, as I do every time, because I want to know what it is that I'm doing. I treat this just like it's a client, and if I don't know anything about the client and what they need, then it makes my job harder. So I need to learn about what it is that I'm doing. So the summary: Appalachian House. Kendrick Thorne is the fundraising coordinator for Appalachian House, a charitable organization located in central Kentucky. One of his responsibilities is to report on the progress Appalachian House is making in soliciting donations. On an administration web page available only to Appalachian House staff, Kendrick wants to display a list of information on recent donations. The data on the donations has been made available to him in a multi-dimensional array within a JavaScript file. Multi-dimensional array, very nice. Kendrick wants your help in retrieving the data from this array and writing a script to produce the HTML code summarizing the result. As part of writing the script for Kendrick, you work with some of the JavaScript array methods used to filter and loop through the contents of an array. The preview of the home page is shown above. The style sheets and graphic files have already been created. All we're doing is, it says we're doing the HTML markup, we're going to be doing the JavaScript, I assume, right? So let's have a look. This is what the page is going to look like when it's finished. And this is what it looks like now. So we have the header, the footer, and the sidebar. We need to put this table in and this little summary right at the top here. So we have the words donor report already, and we have to put in everything below that. I'll leave this open actually. So that is our instructions. We'll have a quick look at the page here. So we have our navigation bar, we have our side navigation bar, I think that is. Yep. This is our side nav. This is our top nav. Here is our section that we're going to be working on, actually called section. Very nice. And then we have the footer down here. So this is where we're going to be inserting some information. And what we're going to insert, let's see, we have, that's the page we're on. We have a report.js. So this has a little bit of functions already. And we have donor.js. And this is all the information. Let's take a look at this file. Remember they said we had a multi-dimensional array. So they actually have a bit of a description here. All right, so the first one is the donor ID, first name, last name, address, city, state, zip code, phone number, email, donation amount, and donation date. So this is actually, oh, that's actually incorrect. That should be, it's a two-dimensional array, and that is the index of the second dimension, not the first dimension. So the first dimension is out here, and then each element in the first dimension of the array is the second dimension of the array. And so the index should actually look like that. First index, and then as we loop through the first one, which we'll probably have to do, then we can access all the elements in the second dimension of the array. So that was not very useful for us. I'm going to put that in my answer key as well. You know what I think happened is they probably have changed this assignment over time and they neglected to change the comments to match the assignment. So let's move over to our first set of instructions and see what we have there. Oh my. One moment here. Okay, so let's go on to our instructions and go to the next page. And our first step is going to be to to link the JavaScript files. So at the top of this page, we've got to make sure that we actually do this. Right? I do occasionally have someone who doesn't do this step and they just get programming and then they forget and they're not sure why things don't display right. And they're looking in their code and they can't find anything wrong with their code, and it's because they didn't actually include the code in the page. So we want to add a script. We have two files, the donors.js and the reports.js. We need both of them. They're both script files. They both have an outside source. And we're going to defer loading on both of them as well. Alright, so I wrote in a blank script so I can copy and paste it, and then just copy and paste the file name into each one. Now, something that for our purposes might not be an issue, but then again we may have an issue, is the donors.js file. This includes all the data that we're going to manipulate. Right? I have made sure to include that before I include the reports.js file. And this is where we're going to put our code where we actually manipulate the file. And so I've made sure that the donors is included first. That way when we get to the report.js file, the donors is already loaded and we can safely access what's in that file without running into any errors. Okay, so that's fairly important. You may get it on accident just because they're in that order already. They're written that way, but I want to make it a point specifically to put them in that order. It says we're not going to be tested on this step, but if we don't do this step, we're not going to pass all the other tests. So we may pass some of them, but not all of them. Now they want us to go to scroll down the file to the H1 heading titled Donor Report, and directly below that, put in the following div elements, which we will insert the donation summary. So I'm just going to actually copy and paste those and directly put those in there. Now I do expect that I'll have an issue with my copy and paste because I know MindTap likes to use the left and right curly quotes, but it looks like they've used regular quotes this time. Whoops. So I may have gotten lucky. I'm going to replace them anyway, just in case my eyes are playing tricks on me. Okay, so I have that. I know I don't have any typos because I copied and pasted it. All right, very good. That worked out. Let's see how they're checking us. They're most likely checking us by actually accessing the contents of the page and looking for an element by CSS selector by the ID tag. All right, so moving on to the next steps. Now we're finally going to go to do some JavaScript. All right, go to the donors.js file. Oh, I'm going to the donors file and study the content of the array, which I did already. Actually, I looked at the content here, right, and I corrected the comments so that I can properly understand how the array is supposed to be, is actually. Note that the first column of the array with an index of 0 contains the ID of each donor. The second column contains the first donor's name, and so on. The amount of each donation. Do not make any changes to the content of this file. I did change the comment. It's not going to make it run any differently, though. It's just a comment. Right. Now we're going to go to the reports.js file. File contains 4 callback functions, 1, 2, 3, 4. A callback function is a function when we execute something and we use this, we call it back at the end of our execution or sometimes during the middle of our execution. And we'll see how they work as well. We're just going to repeatedly call these functions. This one is a sorting function, so we're probably not going to call it too many times, but we can call these multiple times so that we can continue to run the operations in there. Take some time to study the contents of these functions. So let's do that. Let's see what each function does. The first function, calc sum, it's probably going to calculate the sum or the total. We're going to give it a donor amount, and it has this variable donation total plus equals donor amount. Donation total is not a variable that has been defined yet, so I think we're going to have to do that, and we're going to have to define it as a global variable and then access that global variable. Strictly speaking, global variables are not good practice to use because a global variable is by its nature accessible by the entire document. Every function can access it. They are used a lot in JavaScript, and that's because it's JavaScript. Everything is visible on the page anyway, so there's not really any secret or privacy among the data. So a global variable is less of a problem in JavaScript than in some other languages. So that's fine, but we're going to have to define this anyway. So this is going to take an amount that we give it, access that index of the array, and then 9 is the amount. Okay, it's going to access that index of the array, add it to that global total every time we loop through when we do this. We're probably going to have to do this for every element in the array. Find major donors. So this one is going to go through and find donors who have donated more than $1,000. We're probably going to use a for each loop on this one. And this is, and that would definitely be a callback setting if we use the for each. and then donor sort descending. So we have a function. If we call the default sorting method on an array, it's going to sort just alphabetically. We're going to sort numerically by the donor amounts. So we're going to sort them based on how much they donated. If we have a look at this picture, we're going to sort descending based on how much they have donated, and then only show the top donors, the major donors. And then right donor row, we're going to use this function. For each donor, it's going to output a table row with some table data elements, each one consisting of the different elements from the donor inner array. All right. Oops, wrong file. Here we go. So that's going to put those all in there, and as we see, it's going to do the donation amount, donor ID, then date, name, first and last in the same box, address, city and state and zip code all in one box, phone number and email, and as we see here, we have the amount, the amount, the ID, the date. Was it next? Is that the 10th thing? Donation date. Then two things, first name, last name, and then address, city, state, and zip code, all in one TD. Then phone number, and the last one was email. All right, so all these just in a table, and every time we call this and we give it one of the inner arrays, we have a two-dimensional array. And when we give this one of the inner arrays, it'll take that data from the inner array and add this to the donor table. Donor table being yet another global variable that we have not defined yet. So we've gone through that. Now let's actually do some work into this file. All right. Create a variable named donation total. I'm going to put the functions at the top. No, I'm going to put my variables at the top. Okay, donation total. Donation total. And this is what we will calculate the total amount. This is going to be the global variable for this calc sum function. Right? We're going to set the initial value to 0. So we can set it to 0 out here because JavaScript is an interpreted language, and it's going to read one line at a time. And so it'll read this line before all the other lines below. So if we set it to 0, that's the first thing that's going to happen with this variable. And then this function will get defined, but it's not called yet. Okay, we're going to call it right here, actually. Apply the foreach method to the donors array using the callback function calcsum. This statement will calculate the donation total. So the foreach method on the donors array, remember the donors array is a two-dimensional array. In the outside dimension, each index is a different person. So index of 0, this is Mildred Moore. Index of 1 is Jody Wells. Index of 2 is Irene Berry, and so on. Inside each of those indexes, we have another array. It's an array made of arrays. So when we use on the outer array, donors dot for each, this is for each of the elements in the outer array. We're going to call a function, and the function we're going to call is the calcsum. That's going to call the calcsum. Inside the calcsum, it's accessing the inner array or the second dimension of the array. And it's going to access the 9th index, which is the donation amount, and it's going to add that to the donation total. Okay, so the way the for each works is we could define an anonymous function, or we could pass it a function name. Okay, the first argument in the for each function, the inner function that we pass it, the callback function, the first argument is going to be the value at each index of the array. And in our case, each of those is an index, is another array because we have a two-dimensional array. So each time the for each goes through the index, it's going to pass the internal arrays of each one, and that's going to work fine. There is an alternative way that we can call, and we can pass this. We can wrap it in a string, and we can actually give the first argument if we wanted to give something specific. We could, the for each, we don't really want to do that because the for each operates on the array, but for other similar functions like the time interval and timeout, we have the option of passing a string version of a function call. And in this case, we just want to give the name of the function, and we just want to make sure that the function is built correctly, which ours is. It's pre-made for us. So this is going to go through and calculate that sum each time. And if I refresh my page, not much is going to change, nothing really at all, but in the memory in the background, I have already now totaled that information. We've done this part. Next, we're going to create a variable named summary table, storing the following HTML code in the summary table. So I'm going to copy and paste that and create my variable and set it equal to all of that. Of course, it doesn't look quite right because I have line breaks, but remember, if I put a backslash at the end of each line, I can have a multi-line string. And I don't want to tab over, because if I do tab over, those tabs will be included in the string, so I'm not going to do that. And then we have to replace these words, well, some of these words, with the values. Why is, oh, okay, I see. All right, so donors is the length of the donors array. Total is the value of the donation total variable, preceded by a $sign. That's what the $sign is all about. That kind of threw me off there just a moment ago. Apply the toLocalString method to the donation total variable so that the total amount of donations is displayed with a thousands separator in the report. And if we don't do the toLocalString, what we're just going to get is a number. Right? We want to do, here we go. We want to have that comma in there. So for donors plus the length of the donors array. Okay, and we've just continued on our string. So we have our string that goes on to the next line, and then a string stops at the quotation marks. Plus is concatenate, or add, not add, but stick this to the end of that other string, which is the length of the donors array. The length of the donors array is going to tell us how many donors. And then we're going to concatenate again and carry on with the string. And we'll do the same thing with this section. All right, so we have the total there. And the total is actually called donation total. And we are going to use the toLocal string on the total. So donation total dot toLocal string. We can actually use the drop down to help us out. That is a method, so we need to make sure we use our parentheses. Okay, it's not a property, it's a method. Length is a property, so no parentheses on that one. Okay, that's the summary table. Next, I imagine we're going to add the summary table to the page. So set the inner HTML property of the div element with the ID donation summary, and I think we created that in a previous step. So we're going to use inner HTML to set summary table, this long string, into the inner HTML of that div. So let's do that. That is, we access it by doing document get element by ID. Remember our camel casing, our Pascal casing. The ID is donation summary. That's a string, remember that. And then we're going to set the inner HTML. This will take all the HTML that's inside that div, which currently is nothing. Right? There's nothing inside that div, but if there was, we would replace it with whatever we set here. Right? So we're going to replace it with the values stored in the variable summary table. So now if we run our page, we should actually get some output. Yay! And that is the right output based on this view here. 87 donors for a total of $125,200 donated. Okay, so 87 donors. If we look at our donor, yeah, we have a lot of donors in this page. It must be totaling 87. All right, so we should be able to get a check for that, unless I've omitted something. If I skipped a step, I don't think I have. No, looks good. I want to see what they're doing to check it. So they're looking for code patterns, and then they're doing a visual test at the end, and they're looking for specifically just that section of the page. Okay, so they're looking for variables being set. They're looking for foreach. Very nice. Next we have major donors section, and we're going to put that, I guess, below what we've just been working on. Kendrick wants the report to show a list of the donors who contributed $1,000 or more to the Appalachian House using the filter method with the callback function find major donors, create an array named major donors. So create a new variable that will be an array called major donors. Okay, and we're going to set this equal to, we're going to use the filter command on the main array of donors. It's a method that is in the array. So donors.filter, and what this is going to do is we give it the callback function, and then it will use that callback function, which is the callback function, major donors, find major donors. Okay, so this is the callback function, and what this function is going to do, kind of like the foreach. The foreach goes through every element in the array and does something to that element. What this one does is it goes through every element in the array, and our function has to return either true or false. So if we look at our function, we give it each donor one at a time, and then we check, is the donation amount greater than or equal to $1,000? If it is, return true. If it is not, return false. And if this function returns true, it takes that element of the array and adds it to this new array, major donors. It does not harm the old array. We're just going to copy all the values from the old array into a new array only the values that return true when this function calls. And when the function turns false, it passes to the next element in the array, the next donor, uh, and that donor does not get listed. So we have donors in here like this first donor who donated $200. That one's going to get passed over. And we'll go to the next one, and so on. So this new array, major donors, is only going to be made of those who have donated over 1,000 based on this function. And so we've done this part. The next part, Kendrick wants the major donors list sorted in descending order. Apply the sort method to the major donors variable using the callback function donor sort descending. And this is sorting descending not by name or address or anything like that, but actually by their donation amount. That's the 9th index in the array. The 9th index is the donation amount. And it's going to take two arguments into the sort, the way the sort function works. And when it compares them, it's going to put them in either ascending or descending order, depending on which order you subtract them here. And so this is going to be descending order from highest donation to lowest donation. So the way we do this sort is we just use, it's a method built into arrays. So we have major donors dot sort. If we do this, it will sort the default method, and that will be alphabetically. I don't even know if it works properly for arrays or not. I can't remember. And normally I will build it just like they have. So we provide the callback function right here. And what it's going to do is it's going to sort based on the 9th index, which is the donation amount. Okay, if we wanted to do ascending, we would do A minus B instead of B minus A, and it would give us the opposite value. And then it would sort ascending. But he wants the top donor to be on top of the list. Right, so we've done this. We've not put it in the page yet. I believe that's going to be an upcoming step. And there it is. Okay. So we've gotten this part done. Next, we're going to create another new variable called donor table. And this will store the HTML code for the major donors section. Set the initial value of the variable to the text below right here. And so again, just like I have done before, I'll set it equal to, and I'll paste all that in there. And I'll add my backslashes at the end of each line break. Put my semicolon at the end. Don't forget your semicolons. They're small, but they do a big job. They tell the computer when your command is finished. Okay. So that part is done, right? This starts a table, gives it a caption, gives it a heading row, and that's it. It stops. Then we're going to create HTML code for each donor row by applying the foreach method to the major donors variable using the right donor row as the callback. Okay, so they've gone ahead and done all the hard parts. If we were doing this from scratch, we would have to write all these callback functions and we'd have to plan them ahead of time. They've planned a lot of this for us, and we're just going to come in and put the pieces together. It's like we're building a house and they've already made the walls and we're just snapping them all together. That's what we're doing on this page here. Okay, they've already made all the functions and we just have to snap them all together. So we have to execute the foreach command to the major donors variable, major donors dot foreach. Okay, so just like we have done with the major donors, and we did the donors dot filter to build the major donors, and we use the callback function. And then we sorted the major donors function according to the sort function that was made. Now we're going to do the for each, and we're going to use the right donor row. So what for each does, and we did it in the calc sum earlier as well, we took the donors, and for each index in the donors array, we did calc sum, which is we took the outer array for each index in the outer array. We went in to this function, accessed the 9th index of the inner array, and added it to the total. This time, we're going to take each index in the major donors array, which is just a sub-array of the main original array. For each of those, we're going to call the right donor row function. So for each of those, we're going to add to the donor table global variable. Now we've created donor table, and we're going to add a row. We're going to add a row to that variable with the information from the inside indexes. Okay, so here we are. Then we need to close the table, because remember, we opened the table here and all of this. We opened the table, we filled the table with rows. Now we need to close the table. Donor table plus equals, and that's what we're using in this function too, which means we're concatenating, in this case, we're concatenating and assigning the next value, which is just going to be a closing table string. And don't forget your semicolon. Okay, and then next we're going to take this whole donor table variable and assign it to the inner HTML property of the div element that we created down here called donor table. So I'm going to take a little shortcut, and I'm going to copy the last time we did an inner HTML setting, copy and paste it down here. And instead of donation summary, it's donor table. And instead of summary table, it's donor table variable. And double check the values. That's donor table is the ID, and donor table is also the name here. So that should be all set there. And if we refresh, we can see that that didn't happen. Donor table. Well, we want to know why is because I have a typo, donor table. I did not put the uppercase T there, but now I have it. Now I have it. There we go. So I had a typo. Remember, typos are important. Okay, your uppercase and lowercase. This variable, I had a lowercase t. JavaScript thinks that a lowercase t and an uppercase t are two different things, because they are, and it does not set them. Okay, so now that I've corrected my typo, I should be able to get my check mark. And once I do, I want to look in and see all the things that they're looking for in order to get this. So I got the check mark, and they're testing 4 things. They're looking for me having set the donor table. That's this line right here. Then they are looking for the donor table to be added to donor tables. So I guess they were looking for the beginning and the end of these 2 lines, perhaps. Then they're looking for a for each, major donors for each. And then they're looking for the actual visual output. and I seem to have a 3.4% difference. I don't see it. They don't have like the highlighted version of that to show me what the difference would be, but that is correct. And then the last step is to verify. We've been verifying step by step all along. And the validate your code at the end, we don't do this anymore. The W3C HTML validator is out of date. It's going to give us a lot of errors and warnings, and many of them are probably going to be inaccurate. So we don't do this anymore. Here's our page, and it looks just like the expected outcome. Right? MindTap and SimGauge have done all the CSS for us. They did the header, the sidebar, and the footer, and we did all of this section right here. Of course, they did they did all the planning as well, and they made the callback functions for us, and we had to stick them all together and do a tiny bit of math. Well, they did the math. All right, well, that is T10 case problem 3, the Appalachian House.